The studio lights felt hotter than usual that morning, washing the familiar set of The View in a sharp, unforgiving glow. The audience buzzed with anticipation, a low hum of whispers and rustling programs, because Jodie Foster's presence carried a certain weight, quiet, intellectual, and rarely combustible. She sat poised at the table, hands folded, posture composed, eyes alert but calm. Across from her, Joy Behar leaned back slightly in her chair, chin lifted, that familiar spark of mischief and challenge already dancing in her expression. What began as a thoughtful conversation about art, privacy, and public responsibility slowly drifted into more dangerous waters. At first, the exchange felt electric in a good way. Jodie spoke carefully, choosing words like someone accustomed to being misunderstood by headlines. She talked about the cost of fame, about how public discourse had become louder but not necessarily wiser. The audience nodded along, appreciative murmurs rising and falling. Joy responded with humor, light jabs meant to keep things lively. She joked about Hollywood egos, about talk shows and talking too much. Laughter rippled across the studio, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly balanced. Then the tone shifted. Joy leaned forward, tapping the table lightly as she posed a question that landed sharper than intended. It wasn't cruel, but it was pointed, about celebrities speaking on social issues while guarding their own privacy. The words hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Jodie's smile faded just enough for the cameras to catch it. She paused, eyes narrowing in thought, not anger, but something firmer. When she answered, her voice was steady, controlled, yet unmistakably edged with conviction. I think there's a difference, Jodie said, between using your voice responsibly and being pushed into constant performance. Silence doesn't always mean indifference. The audience quieted. Joy raised an eyebrow, a half-smile forming that suggested she wasn't convinced. She countered quickly, almost instinctively, suggesting that silence from influential figures could be interpreted as avoidance. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it was persistent, circling the point like a comedian who sensed a punchline waiting to be forced out. Jodie shifted in her seat. She uncrossed her hands and placed them flat on the table, a subtle gesture, but one that signaled she was no longer merely answering questions, she was drawing a line. Interpretation, she said, is not the same as truth. And we've become far too comfortable confusing the two. A ripple of reaction swept through the room. Some audience members applauded softly, others leaned forward, sensing something unscripted unfolding. The co-hosts exchanged quick glances, unsure whether to jump in or let the moment breathe. Joy laughed lightly, but the laugh didn't fully reach her eyes. She fired back with a quip about public platforms coming with public expectations, her words moving faster now, sharper. The conversation had slipped its rails. Jodie's calm didn't break, but it hardened. She spoke about boundaries, about how relentless commentary reduced complex people into symbols. Each sentence was measured, but together they formed something undeniable, a critique not just of the question, but of the culture behind it. The audience was completely silent now, the kind of silence that crackles louder than applause. Joy inhaled, preparing another retort, but Jodie continued, her voice still even, still controlled. When we demand constant explanation, she said, we stop listening. We just wait to argue. That was the moment the air changed. Joy straightened in her chair, lips pressed together. The playful tension was gone, replaced by something more personal, more immediate. She gestured with her hand, as if to interrupt, but Jodie finished her thought without raising her voice, without rushing. It wasn't defiance, it was certainty. For a split second, the studio existed in limbo. Cameras rolled. Producers froze behind the scenes. This wasn't rehearsed. This wasn't a soundbite neatly packaged for social media. It was raw disagreement unfolding in real time. Joy glanced toward the control booth, then back at Jodie. Her expression shifted from challenge to control. She placed both hands on the table, palms down, and leaned toward the microphone. The familiar rhythm of the show had fractured, and Joy knew it. She'd seen moments like this before, when conversation stopped being conversation and started becoming something else entirely. Okay, Joy said, her voice firm, cutting through the silence. Hold on, we're going to pause right here. A collective gasp moved through the audience as one. The co-hosts froze mid-breath. Jodie leaned back slightly, eyes steady, unflinching. Joy raised her hand, not in dismissal, but in command. We're live, Joy continued, her tone calm but authoritative, and this conversation matters. But we're not going to talk over each other, and we're not going to turn this into something it isn't. The director's voice crackled faintly through studio headsets. The red live sign glowed brighter than ever. Joy took a breath, visibly centering herself, then looked directly at Jodie, not as an adversary, but as someone demanding space. For a moment, Joy said, "We stop." The words landed like a gavel. The show, the chatter, the momentum, all of it halted. And in that sudden stillness, it was clear, this wasn't just another heated exchange. Something irreversible had already begun. The silence that followed Joy's command felt unreal, as if the entire studio had been suspended in time. The audience sat perfectly still, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or remain invisible. Even the co-hosts seemed uncertain where to place their eyes. Some stared down at their notes, others glanced between Joy and Jodie like spectators at the edge of a sudden storm. The familiar rhythm of the view had been broken, replaced by a fragile pause that demanded intention. Joy removed her glasses slowly and set them on the table, a small but telling gesture. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, steadier, stripped of humor. "This isn't about winning an argument," she said. "It's about hearing each other without turning it into a spectacle." Jodie nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement. She didn't rush to speak, didn't fill the silence. Instead, she waited, letting Joy reclaim control of the moment. That restraint only intensified the tension. The audience could feel it. This was no longer television as usual. This was two strong personalities negotiating the line between dialogue and disruption, live and unfiltered. One of the co-hosts gently tried to re-enter the conversation, offering a bridging comment about differing perspectives. But Joy lifted her hand again, not sharply this time, just enough to signal that the moment needed closure before continuation. "Give me 1 second, she said, eyes still on Jodie. Joy turned fully toward her. "I respect where you're coming from," she said, carefully. "But when we sit at this table, the expectation is exchange. Pushback is part of it." Jodie's response came softly, but with clarity. "And I accept that," she said. "What I resist is being framed as unwilling when I'm simply being careful." There's a difference between engagement and provocation. The audience exhaled almost audibly. This wasn't escalation, it was recalibration. The sharp edges of the earlier exchange dulled just enough for understanding to creep back in. Joy nodded slowly, absorbing the words. For the first time since the tension ignited, her shoulders relaxed. "Fair," Joy said. "That's fair." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then stronger, as if the audience was grateful for permission to breathe again. The red live sign still glowed, but the danger had passed. Producers signaled for the conversation to continue, and Joy slid her glasses back on, reclaiming her familiar rhythm. She turned to the table. "This," she said, gesturing between herself and Jodie, "is why these conversations are hard. Everyone's watching, everyone's interpreting, and no one gets to rewind." Jodie offered a faint smile. "Exactly." The rest of the segment unfolded more cautiously. Questions were phrased with care, answers delivered with measured openness. Yet the energy in the room remained charged, as if everyone knew they had witnessed something rare, a moment where control was nearly lost and then deliberately regained. As the show moved toward commercial break, Joy addressed the audience directly. "We're going to step away for a moment," she said, "and when we come back, we'll keep talking, because stopping doesn't mean shutting down." The cameras cut. The applause continued, louder now, mixed with murmurs and excited whispers. Off camera, producers rushed in, voices low but urgent. Jodie remained seated, composed, exchanging quiet words with one of the co-hosts. Joy stood briefly, stretching her shoulders, then turned back to Jodie. Off air, the tension dissolved into something unexpectedly human. "You didn't make it easy," Joy said, not unkindly. Jodie smiled, just a little. "I wasn't trying to." When the show returned from break, the tone had shifted. The conversation resumed with a sense of mutual respect, the earlier clash now contextualized rather than ignored. Viewers at home could feel the difference. This wasn't damage control, it was acknowledgement. By the end of the episode, social media was already ablaze. Clips circulated rapidly, dissected frame by frame. Some praised Joy for stopping the show before it spiraled. Others applauded Jodie's composure and refusal to be boxed in. But what lingered most wasn't the argument, it was the pause. That rare, deliberate stop that reminded everyone watching that live television still carried risk, and that restraint could be just as powerful as confrontation. As the credits rolled, Joy gave Jodie a final nod. Not victory, not defeat, just recognition, and for those who witnessed it live, The moment wouldn't be remembered as a clash alone, but as the instant when the noise stopped, and something real briefly took its place.